It's a much simpler, I suppose, and maybe a lot worse in many ways, but simpler, and at least when it comes to technology. After decades of writing in the margins of a life as teacher, mentor, and dean, she is currently focusing on full-time writing. Congratulations, it's the dream. You're living the dream. Her poetry has been published in Coal Hill Review, the Sauzier Poetry Review, Christian Century, Relief, a Journal of Art and Faith, the Windhover, St. Catherine Review, and other journals. A native of Western Pennsylvania, she's long made her home in rural Allegheny County. Linda, welcome. I should say for the poets, I do video this, but I don't broadcast that video. So it's archived if you guys want it. I keep it as an archive. Yeah. And if nobody has objections, it can go up on YouTube.
Thank you very much, George. And thanks to you all for being here. Looking forward to this evening, to hearing Heather, to hearing some of you. I've only been here one time before, and it was just a wonderful evening. I love the space. Thank you to the McFadden Coffee Company for good beverages and things to eat, and for this lovely space. I like the way this series is bringing together visual art and music and verbal art. The artistic community is so important, I think, these days to keeping some kind of a soul in our existence. Poetry has been a lifelong passion of mine. The first poems I remember memorizing were a children's book in rhyming couplets that began, "In the green and grassy jungles full of howly, growly game, stalked a bold and mighty hunter. Howdy doody was his name." And the King James version of the 23rd Psalm. And if you listen closely, I think you'll hear the influence of both of those things in my work. I love the way poems invite us to slow down, to pay attention, and to take our own small lives seriously. With Mary Oliver, I think some of the best poems ask us, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Like Emily Dickinson, I want to dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose. The work I like best is rooted in ordinary life, but open to possibility. Also like poems written by people deeply aware of the legacy of poets past, but that still pay close attention to the lives that the poet is living in the ordinary now. These days I'm reading Louise Glick, Ada Limon, A.E. Stallings, Maggie Smith, Suzanne Rhodes, Julie L. Moore, Heather Yanda, and a host of other people who are trying to do those things. My first poem tonight is going to be a sort of poetic creed. Several years ago, I was on a panel judging a literary book contest, and it happened to be books of poems. At the end, the choice came down to two contenders. One was a beautifully crafted collection of poems in which the writer worked through the shattering trauma of her divorce. But the poems moved their way to healing through the healing power of family, community, nature, and faith. And this is the book. This is that book. It's called Full Warm Moon by Julie L. Moore, and I would highly recommend it. It didn't win. The other contender was an ambitious tour de force walking back through much of Western culture, echoing all the mostly great male minds in an assemblage of poetry that ranged from doggerel to fairly good. It was like I taught Western culture, and it was like slogging your way through a Western culture course. But I was outvoted, and my response was to sulk for a while. So this poem is partly assault and partly homage to writers who pay attention to ordinary life with all the truth it carries. This poem appeared in Christian Century and is called On the Persistence of Lies in Poetry. Of course, we all know, Adorno said that after Auschwitz, poetry as we know it is senseless. The world keeps on stumbling into the flames, and dust obscures even the faces of children. Can any art matter without the big ideas that fuel the fire? Over Black Forest cake and iced wine, the conversation drifts to history and remembrance. There's Hallberg, a boy in Germany, walking with his grandfather by the tracks near the railroad station. They see a train stopped, hear voices, human voices, murmur from the cattle cars. Don't look, his grandfather hisses. Just walk on. Some things are better not to know. Across the table, Herbert lifts his glass to ghosts. Don't believe them when they plead our ignorance. By God, we knew. Awake at 3 a.m., I open a book of poems passed over for the prize because they merely celebrate the personal. These poems know. Against the big ideas, they weigh the heft of each brief life. Sing, home games, potlucks, hugs. Each green fuse edging back the dark. Even when we lived in Appalachia, Winter insisted on showing up in my poems. The next poem, published in Relief, a Journal of Art and Faith in the spring of 2019, looks at one of those seasons of discord that come even to the best of married lives. It's called Traveler's Advisory. As the first flakes spiral lazily down, shoppers at Jubilee jam the aisles to grab what comfort they can. Bread, milk, toilet paper, chocolate, videos, beer. As we jostle our way through the throng, I wish some radio had warned of your Arctic front before the avalanche. Now wrapped in woolen scarves and thick spun spite, we clutch our separate notions of the cold. The air's grown harsh as my thoughts, burning in my mouth like the words I've spilled. Icicles hang in ragged fringes as sidewalks heave themselves uneven. Heading home, we pass a barn whose roof has crumpled under this weight of cold. We need a psalm for glacial voices now to knit us in some brusque, if brief, accord. Muffled and booted, we lumber through a world of glimpses. Patch of ruddy cheek, downcast eye, a glint of snow on lashes already wet with tears. We're left to guess the world and one another by our tumble-down words, gestures all against the rigors of this weather. And in the same journal, on a more positive note, a poem that attempts to capture an experience of just enjoying life together. And it's based on something that really happened when Stephen and I visited an art gallery and came across one of those wonderful mobiles by Alexander Calder. It's called Saturday at the Gallery. It was one of those soundtrack moments after Chagall and his levitating lovers, the two of us strolling along the mezzanine, pausing to gaze at the Calder suspended below us. So close, I spotted a Giacometti cobweb where the suspending wire met the mobile's main horizontal bar. Gray dust furred the edges of this pendant world. Still, the great toy was bright with possibility. As I leaned on the wooden rail, you pursed your lips as if to whistle or blow a kiss. Breathing in deeply, your out-breath set a universe in motion, lifting the first pedal of the mobile, sending a current through all the fine lines of wire, looped joints, metal forms that whispered leaf, keel, wing, sail. The ripple of motion shook my breath as kisses do, as red, blue, yellow blades of the longest outrider stirred and swung away. You breathed again. We clasped hands laughing as masts and sails of a dangling armada gently bobbed on an invisible main, rocking us at anchor in a harbor of air. I've always been haunted by imagining other people's lives, and maybe to be a writer, whether of fiction or poetry, you have to have a little bit of this nebulous. And I'm also haunted by the traces left by the real breathing people of the past. Stephen and I were fortunate enough to live several times for a season in London, England. And during one of those sojourns, I remember walking several times past the site of the old Bethlehem madhouse, which was called Bedlam. That was its nickname, and it gave its name to our sense of chaos. At that time, part of the grounds were shut in by temporary high fences, and I learned in the Manchester Guardian that archaeologists were digging up graves of the long ago patients. The graves, I believe, were from the 18th century. The pictures of the open graves were so haunting. So I wrote this poem published in the Sallier Review in 2020. No, by the way, this is a good, if you're a poet, this is a good magazine. They accept stuff from all over the country, although they are an Appalachian regional magazine. The poem is called A Bedlam Madonna. St. Mary Bethlehem site, London, 2015. After a ferment of centuries, the archaeologist kneels in the presence of death, brushing decades of earth from forgotten bones. She has opened the grave of a mother, all bones, mingled with bones of an infant nestled close, Madonna and child of the macabre, ivory mosaic in black soil. In Bedlam's burying ground, the camera frames mother and child with clinical detachment. Her skull tilts up, jaws gaping, turned to the side as if death had twisted her gaze from the fragile body in her arms. His small cranium smashed, a puzzle of bone shards cradled close to her jagged ribs. All that might laugh, reach, suckle, caress, has been stripped away with the names no one remembers. The archaeologist kneels to measure, not to mourn. Her calipers recite dimensions as she notes the bone's placement, condition, displacement, depth. But at dusk, she'll pause as distant bells sing out from an empty church. The Angelus? Whisper of promises over the dead, still ringing as if even these mad bones mattered. As if even they might someday rise, sing half-forgotten hymns as darkness drops at last over our Bedlam world. When I was very small, I loved to stare at a framed picture of the Taj Mahal that hung in a farmhouse at my mom's family's homestead. No one I knew had ever traveled any further than Chicago, Illinois, or Amherst, Massachusetts. Yet there it was, the Taj Mahal, beautiful symmetries, blue sky, the epitome of all things distant and exotic. I never thought I would get to visit it, but I did. I was amazed to find that this world-class tourist site, which I had seen through the lens of Arabian Nights fairy tales, is a shrine with deep meaning for people grieving their own losses, as Shah Jahan grieved the death of Mumtaz Mahal. This poem, published in Windhover in the fall of 2022, is an attempt to capture what I felt. It's called The Daughter of the Book Visits the Taj Mahal. Each breath is labored in this heat, gives notice of last things. Underfoot, the carpet's blood red, threadbare as the sorrows she carries with her. Yamuna's mudflats defy reflection, but the tomb's alabaster symmetries float against a cobalt sky. Inept at pilgrimage, her bare feet stumble against the threshold. Touched by the sun, the marble is warm as human flesh, smooth as a child's skin. In the white hall, she sees another woman, her plum and gold hijab elegantly draped. She leans her forehead against the marble lattice that shields the sepulchre. Her slim brown fingers grasp stone vines, claim their promise of paradise, inlaid sepal, leaf, petal. Here, heaven is solid, delicate, traced out in China's green jade, red jasper from the Punjab, birthplace of the beloved, the jewel of the palace. Tibet's sky stone, Ceylon's lapis lazuli, fit for heaven's queens. A mortal paste holds fast hope's blossoms here, a mix of marble dust, lentils, beeswax, sugarcane, and sorrow. Beside her, a gray bearded man gazes at the tomb, one hand on the lattice, one pressed to his heart. He's so close she can trace the silver path of a tear down the stone stillness of his face. Catch the murmur of his prayer to the merciful. Her own prayer is faltering breath, mingled with the rest. Over the hush of human voices, a curved silence of white stones, sheltering, inscrutable, lifts verses from Quran over a sea of shadows. Black onyx sails of thought unfurl with severe grace. Whisper promises she can't yet make out, though beauty hallows each barefoot hope. I'm also fascinated by conversations between artists and between arts, and by the ways we navigate long-term relationships. I once participated in a poetry workshop with a well-known Southern poet whose wife, an accomplished weaver, sat in on the workshop, quietly observing. As I watched her and thought about her own work hanging in the Arts Center gallery, I kept imagining how she saw the workshop. The poem is called, quite mundanely, The Weaver Sits In on Poetry Workshop. Her hands are quiet as she watches him work, his words cutting the sand flats of their poetry in search of plans. With eyes accustomed to the finest fraying, she sees him watching for the least dimple in their words. Tunnel of breath, subtle clue. Her fingers think in blues and grays, and possibly a subtle shade of green found only in the middle distance of the sea. While he bends his voice to the sand's resistance, she plates dune grass and sea oats with her eyes. As he excavates, she sees his ankles under the rolled up cuff of business, his supple feet uncut by these shells so tightly clasped. The sand flats roll back under the tide as he thanks them all and closes his folder, that scavenger's bucket. She sees his own strand, adrift with sea glass, mermaid's tears, pebbled and pearled. She draws it into her own loom, the warp thread stained with a sweat of roots, blood of berry and bark, but the woof of Tyrian, till lands emerge under her mind shuttle, where the poet, her husband, comes home from the sea and sings to the sheltering rhythm of her own hands dancing over the thread. While I don't have any Ukraine poems, I don't think this day can go without a little nod to the sad things that are happening in the world in which we live. More, of course, is about the most volatile thing in our world. And today, Ukraine is on many of our hearts and minds. And besides that, we're still confronted daily with the violence of our own society. All too often, our media-saturated culture pays attention to and even applauds the people who stir things up, the ones who create as much harm as they can. But I'm always wanting to think about the people who solve problems, mend breaches, rebuild cities, tend to the difficult work of making peace. When I was 12, going on 13, I had my first experience of disaster. Explosions at the American cyanamide plant near my Western Pennsylvania home, which ironically is not all that far from East Palestine, Ohio, which is in the news today. This poem was posted by St. Catherine Review in September 2022. It's called Volatile Substances. For months, we've been stirring and stirring strange thoughts, awash in a sea of angers, watching ideas swirl, their colors streaky, resistant, volatile. And I keep thinking about that July morning back in 1964, Louise teaching us to play gin rummy at the dining room table of her house in town. How we felt more than heard the boom. The floor trembling against our feet, teacups chattering in the cabinet. How Louise paused, holding her card in the air with bony fingers, her blood-red nails. How she looked up, her green-black hair lacquered into place, her face slipping open. How small hairs pricked at the nape of my neck when the phone rang. How, at the cyanamide plant, the earth roared as the first blast flung raw flesh, rag, bone. Human confetti splashed against the astonished woods. How for days volunteers from all over gathered the pieces. How over in Shed 3, Will Wallace went on, stirring his batch, while the earth rocked under his feet and shed walls began to smoke. How it just kept stirring those volatile substances till the batch was blended, till it reached just the right chemical equilibrium. How he kept stirring till the job was done. How his crew walked out alive. And finally, sometimes we encounter heroes of a smaller, subtler sort. People who astonish us with uncommon, common actions that leave a lasting mark. Children are especially good at this. So I want to end with a poem that pays tribute to a kid I met in the post office in Bristol, Tennessee in the 1990s. This was posted in October 2022 by St. Catherine Review. It's called A Girl in the P.O. Can I put the dollar in for you? She asks. Her dark eyes shine like molasses in sunlight. Her scraped back hair explodes in an anthracite halo. My heart's drumbeat shifts from floor to the floor to jazz ostinato. Why this zero at the bung? The P.O.'s empty, for one thing. Just me and this harlequin kid with her hot pink sneakers, electric blue jacket, and crown of barrettes, yellow as goldfinches. I scan the room for a big brother's hoodied slouch, or the hard-faced stare of an older sister with pouting fuchsia lips and bleached taffy hair. But it's just us. I bite my lips, trying to make out this kid's particular hustle. We're in a corner by the vending machine where Palladian windows cast barred shadows on polished marble, and the clerk is nowhere in sight. Really, the kid's what Grandma Valley would have called a mite of a thing. Skinny and small, not even half my size. $1's not much to us. Managing my best nylon glove Sunday smile, I fumble in my purse. She flashes me a candy store grin, accepts the rumpled dollar bill, flicks it with a magician's wrist, rubs it smooth along the machine's steel edge, feeds it into the narrow slot without a hitch. Can I choose? I nod. Why not? We've come this far. I watch as she considers options, slowly touches each smudged glass rectangle over the stamps as if she's inventing happiness from limited options. Stars and stripes, dinosaurs, dolphins. I watch her hesitate over storybook bluebirds and scarlet cardinals perched in the mad white flourish of April dogwoods. Okay, so maybe it is a dazzle of possibility. Butterflies, I think smugly, as her firm jab releases a packet. Rubik's Cube bright in the rose of her palm. As I hesitate, she hands me the stamps with a flourish. Strange faces stare at me from each perforated frame. Masks carved by half-forgotten people who hoped to sing the world awake. I'm left pondering choices as the girl pirouettes, skips away, jives off to a music I'm deaf to. She just vanishes. Not waiting for a nickel or a dime, not asking for a stamp, not even pausing to look back. She evades even the astonished applause of my smile. Having worked her own angles of amazement, she leaves me alone in the P.O. Just another clueless middle-aged white girl, clutching the moment like a patent-leather purse, wanting to hold on to the jazz of her joy, to the way she worked the machines of the ordinary with consummate grace.
Can we have like a bathroom break? Thank you.
Absolutely. You're giving me a chance to blab on, Heather, which is always welcome. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, just letting you know that we have a new thing we're doing that Salone brought down to the box. So I guess there's an artwork tradition. Artworks was running down the street where if you want to vote on any of the artist's work, the artist would be happy to find out which is anybody's favorite. There's no reward or anything. It's just that she's going to find out what people like, and it's just a tradition. So I have a little voting box, and later on, if you want to walk around and look at the art.
It's really helpful because a lot of the artists we have here, once they do a show here or are in the process of doing shows elsewhere, they kind of they're able to set up shows all around the county, all around the region. So it really helps them to know what people like. So we appreciate it.
They got a little voting box over there.
Yeah. And I would be, first of all, I want to say thank you for that incredibly elegant and finely observational poetry. Really incredible. Kind of encompasses so much, from London to the airborne toxic event just down below, might say. It was really, really fantastic. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, you were talking about ekphrastic, poetry that responds to art and literature that responds to art. And we are actually going to have in September, that I'm getting into the second half of the year, so I'm cheating. Marjorie Maddox will be here with her daughter, who's a visual artist, and they will do sort of a joint evening talking about ekphrastics, reading ekphrastics, and talking about art. So that should be fun. Not gonna. By the end of the night, I'll probably tell you all about the entire year, in one form or another. I should say to everybody, including the people who are signed up to read the open mic, if you feel like you want to play with this microphone and get it into a good position for you, by all means, go right ahead. Never my forte dealing with the mic. Okay. Without further ado, I have a bio, and I'm going to read it. Heather Hallberg Yanda is a graduate of the MFA program in poetry at Western Michigan University and has taught at Alfred University. Her undergraduate alma mater for 26 years. Wow, your undergraduate alma mater. That must be something, yeah. She has poems published and forthcoming in such journals as Tar River Poetry, Barely South Review, Comstock Review, Banyan Review, and the Yale Journal of Medical Humanities. In the midst of the pandemic, after many years sending out her manuscript, her first collection, Late Summer's Origami, was published by Ashland Poetry Press. She is looking for a publisher for her second collection. Any publishers in the room? What the Stones Borrowed. Heather Hallberg Yanda.
Soundboard is means it's okay.
You can go up. Would you like me to turn it up?
Is this better?
Can everyone hear?
Is that better? I want to stay.
Yes. Yeah.
This is the thing that scares me the most.
Here we go.
Is this better? I don't write loud poems, so.
I think you're good.
I thought I'd begin with a few of the poems from the collection that was published. I haven't gone back to them in a while, and kind of like what I'm bumping into. And so that I just begin there. I love writing about ordinary things because I think I realize in the whole passage of time that nothing's really ordinary if you really care about it. The season's a little off for this one, but this is called Lessons She Learned from the Wind. In a few hours, September will take the lessons she learned from the wind and leave us. She's dressed for a party in the lake's silken evening gown, all glitter and wave, and the best wide-brimmed hat with flowers grown in her garden, toad lilies and asters. She borrowed her favorite constellation for new earrings, fog for a lace collar. She hurries past us now, but certainly she'll return to prove how wrong October is. You can't get rid of her easily, or for good. She's left a few leaves from her notebook, her novel's first brilliant chapters, just as the seasons change, spills from her purse. I have a friend who told me he used to wake up in the middle of the very early mornings so he could go out and watch the sunrise over the ocean when he lived in Florida. borrowed what he told me and made it into Waking in Darkness. I imagine him waking in darkness, dressing in silence, careful not to disturb the sleeping house. Exiting quietly, he drove to the shore where sky, sand, and ocean shared the same shade of gray, as if the sun were waiting for him to conduct the hour. When he bowed his head, first light feathered the sky. One hand gestured, and tall grass swooned with joy. Exhaling, he extinguished the stars, one by one. Visible still, the moon watched the sea turn its great pages. My friend has always known its long story, the calling forward, the immense struggle to understand, the letting go. The water's sound filled him with silence. The wind's motion made him still. There may be other moments as clear as this one, but none so purely his, so singular. The sea will never make this exact exchange. Warm air curves around him as the tide grows. Water tongues the sand. Sunlight fills him, and the day widens with expectation. We have property about a quarter of a mile away from a small farm that when we first owned it, the farm was owned by a lovely older couple who one was a science professor at Alfred University. And I was there right around this time when he was cooking up maple syrup. This is called The Color of Pennies. It begins like water, poured into a metal vat, perched over a fire stoked just so. My friend stands by the bubbling liquid, which darkens slowly, huddled in a down jacket and a leather cap, which couldn't be warm enough. He stirs in long, elegant strokes, as he has done in all the years past. In each turn of the spoon, he remembers the birth of each child, the admiration of his wife, the comfort of their home, and the moments of prayer, like this one, with syrup orbiting his spoon. Little billows of smoke rise in their own calligraphy, sweeten the cool air. In his 80-some years, his step is still sure, his arms strong when he pulls the buckets from the pierced trees and carries them back to the sugar bush from where he beckoned me during my walk. Primitive as it is, a lean-to almost, surrounded by trees whose names he has begun to teach me: maple, ash, dogwood, horse chestnut. Even when I'm there, he moves silently. Sticks break beneath his feet. Some birds, newly emerged in the warmth of sugaring time, fly overhead, call to him. I would like to learn their names too, and he copies the call of each one who passes, hums with its whistle, and tells its name as if he were naming a very specific concerto by Bach or Vivaldi. When the last of the syrup is emptied into the vat and turns the color of pennies, we walk the few yards to his kitchen, where his wife decants the syrup into glass jars. I say hello, a sudden visitor not wanting to intrude. After we catch up on our absences, I am gifted with a jar, still warm in my own. Cradling the sunset in my hands, I leave them, my mind filled with that room. I envy the longevity of their marriage, the way one moves to make space for the other, the way their silences are choreographed together and apart. Like folded linen, the evening is put away. I walk past their kitchen window, see them sitting together by the fire. He is brushing her hair in long, elegant strokes, the movement of water over her shoulders. so much. Again, we're celebrating the ordinary here. This is called Through the Lavender Evening. How intimate this act. Two people folding a blanket they've unpinned from the clothesline. Holding respective corners, they shake away wrinkles. They make the first fold like the spine of a book. In its pages exist spirited laughter, the evolution of their beliefs. Thank you so much. Hesitations, failures, and indiscretions. How carefully they chose their words and the space that exists between them, as if all had to be summoned properly. So too, the movement of their folding, its meticulous choreography, coming together, folding, moving apart, and folding again. Their obedient shadow follows. They have always known whose hands will hold the corners, who will make the last fold, who will carry it through the yard, through the lavender evening, and into their waiting home. Sorry. Spend a lot of time grading papers these days, and spending time with students who are not book lovers and are not poetry lovers and are not writing lovers. So my chances to write are in these little corners of the day when I can. And so little bits of things come up here and there. I'm not always in love with what I make. This is one of the most recent poems I have. It's called Snow from Snow. Each evening, deer enter the silver peace of my front yard. They nibble the shambles of pachysandra, brush past maple leaves quivering, seek old fruit among brambles. They part snow from snow beneath my window, which glows from my lamp. It ghosts on my page and throws downward stark, angular shadows. The deer look up. Our eyes meet, so engaged in the stillness we share. There's a silence so resonant I can hardly breathe. Not far from here, an owl calls. It begins to snow again. The deer remain. My entire yard enfolds a calm I have found so rarely, with brambles, with leaves that fall sparingly. A long time ago, my dad made a dollhouse for my sister, and it's this lovely space, and my dad was an architect, and this house was just marvelous. It was an architect's house, and I think my sister and I are 6 years apart, so this little space was always sort of this time of wonder for me, and so I wrote about that house, that this is what came of that. This is called Mr. and Mrs. Little. I picture my dad weeks before Christmas, his head bent over his drawings for my sister's dollhouse. I picture my dad, his pencil behind his ear, measuring and cutting each wall so everything met at the right angle. So wall and wall became living room, dining room, and kitchen. A staircase led to the second floor, a bedroom, a bathroom, a guest room. Whistling tunelessly, he painted the outside pale yellow, my sister's favorite shade, with white trim and a white front door. Several times I know he stepped back, surveyed his work, peered into one window, or nudged the front door ajar, welcoming her the Christmas she was 9 and I was 3. I still remember the awe I had as she turned that house over time to a home for the pretend couple I always imagined as Mr. and Mrs. Little, who I'm certain never had a bad day, never worried about poor health or politics. Not here in this content room with all the book-filled shelves, a flute waiting its musician resting on the music stand, a knitting project here on a rocking chair. I suspect the Littles looked out their windows to watch us evolve in all our awkward and beautiful ways. They knew about first boyfriends or math tests gone wrong. They knew my mother hung clothes on the line all summer. I picture my dad walking down our hall. I'm certain he paused at my sister's door, looked in at the house, where he and Mr. Little each exchanged a knowing nod. This is called Sunlight Through Studio Windows. My friend, who was once my student, teaches my dad to make a clay bowl. She sits by the wheel where he asks clay to rise, to become new. With the slightest touch, the clay ribbons upward, outward, as the sun leans through studio windows across their shoulders. Maybe during that time, my dad forgets his wheelchair, his hands subtle quiver. Maybe the stories from their disparate lives unspool in these hours together. My friend leans in to guide or to encourage, hand and hand and hand and hand are lost in the clay. What is found is this moment's alchemy, how their friendship, the light, the spirit in the studio, join in the bowl they made, the shape of their laughter. Someday we'll get a chance to pick blackberries. This is called Among Blackberries. The ripest ones can be found in the tight knot of brambles, or below that, just shy of view, by soil and root in dappled light, as if nature asks me exactly why I want them, and if I've truly earned such treasures. Late summer's origami enfolds me, each crease a day's lost corner, and all the fruit sprinkled, night's confetti in the waiting shrubs, glistens like sequins. Part metaphor, part childhood, this act. Berries fall, tuck, tuck in my bowl. Each one teaches patience, the goodness of hard work, the singleness of a season's errands, as the sunset too falls into my hands. The big woods behind my house that slopes up to a hill, and I walk my dogs back there a lot. This came up kind of a long time ago, different dogs than what I have now, but early in my time living in that house, I started to investigate the woods that were, I have neighbors, but they're not really around, and I don't think I ever saw anybody in that area. So this is called The Neighbor's Beautiful Daughters. I don't fantasize about beaches anymore, not sunlight mirroring across waves, nor shells collecting along a shoreline. I don't imagine the speed and sound of a city, not neon lights lisping along the widest street, nor the precision of a shingle and brick, house after house. Not when I have this, top of a hill, trail to nowhere but sky. My dogs and I have walked this so many times, even a good winter doesn't erase our footprints. Here, a ring of maples, like the neighbor's beautiful daughters, bow to a clearing, take in the forest's deep breath. They lean inward, to tell a joke, to mend a disagreement, to whisper a secret. I stand among them, eager to learn the lessons they teach, grace, imagination, commitment. Together we revere the honest shadows and lift our arms toward the darkening sky. I don't know how long I've been here. Is this still okay?
We've got another 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. This is called the borrowed kayak. There's a reservoir near me that, you can't, okay. There's a reservoir near me where I got a chance to borrow somebody's kayak and to go out into it. After just minutes, in the midst of a new perspective, here in a borrowed kayak, afloat at the edge of a reservoir I've passed so often, I forgot its beauty. I saw only tomorrow and uncertainty instead of cloud and imagination, or water and clarity. The boat carries me to the water's center. The bow slices the surface with the assurance of a realization, no matter how fleeting it may be, between mystery and knowledge, silence and movement, between grief and understanding. I always end a reading with the same poem. I grew up in Cleveland, East Side, and had the great gift of living down the street from a clarinetist who became a very dear friend. And on hot days in the summer, which there are many, we left our windows open and got to hear Frank practice. And what a great way to grow up, to hear this amazing music coming down Brick Street. This is called Open Window. Years ago, 5 turning to 10, my neighbor practices clarinet before an open window. I heard him on thick evenings in July when humidity began to lift from the brick street we shared. I remember turning in bed, aware only of the clarinet's notes from 7 houses away, and of window-shaped light tracing the walls whenever a lone car drove by. My breath fell into gentle cadences, its air thin, so only the clarinet was heard. These are not small moments slowly to be darkened from memory's light. I don't know why we choose to love one person over another, observes the clarinet. I don't know why one place is home, another not. Now we are in different streets, miles and lives from each other. My open window receives different sounds or silence. Some other neighbor hears the clarinet, watches shadows hesitate and move across his bedroom walls. He may not know this moment is meant to be celebrated, a solitude to be lifted like a trophy or paged through as a book. Perhaps he does not hear the music the way I did, lying there in the room that used to be mine. He does not know he lives there for this purpose alone, to learn what the clarinet insists. You must love your life.
Heather, can I ask you to stay there for a minute?
Sure.
And I'm going to invite Linda back up for a couple of minutes. Bring another chair. Just ask you a question and open things up to any questions people have. A question about your approach to writing a poem. So, Linda, from hearing your work, I really, from hearing it, I get a great sense of how closely you said you love that poetry slows people down. Something I tell my students all the time, like, you need to do this because it's going to slow you down. But really, really, really sharp and constant observation. So I wonder, when you know you have the subject of a poem, for whatever reason. What is your, do you have a process? Does the process vary? And I guess the two of you will have very different answers to this.
I think it's kind of all over the place. It depends on time too. I tend to look for a story and don't always find one, but and a lot of times the notebook decides things, I think. I'll sit down with that and you have the right music playing or, drinking the right kind of tea. A lot of things happen that I'm always surprised by what comes up.
I think too, sometimes, this isn't true for every poem, but I keep a notebook and folders and little scraps of paper all over the house. And sometimes a poem comes together a little bit like one of those old crazy quilts. Have you ever seen one of those? Instead of having a pattern, they're stitched together for all different kinds of pieces. I'll have a piece and it'll be sitting there for a while, and then I'll find another piece and I'll match it down, and pretty soon I've got something that works. And then, maybe I'll look for a story or a thread to carry through. But it is a kind of, I don't know, I think about quilts and mosaics and bricolage and what's that called? Collage in art. There are the things that you see, and then there are the images you get in your head. And that's probably the easy part. The hard part is getting it to settle down into language. Finding not only a story, but a form, and then the right words, and then making sure that the words have sounds that make some kind of music together. I tend to like poetry that's a little more musical. It should be fairly subtle, but not. I want it somehow to sing. And I know you do that in your poetry. A lot of the work, the sound effects are very subtle, but they're there. It isn't just a picture. It's that line that you're following with the words.
I tend to find that I rewrite a lot, and I always do it by hand, and I like the act of writing, and I sit in, I'm from Alfred, I sit in the collegiate, and it's loud, and people are walking by, and I find that all becomes part of the whole process, and I like that.
Your cadences, both of you, are really notably well crafted, kind of almost cascading in some of the poems, really beautiful. And it's funny, that Sean Thomas Doherty, who was here a few months ago, said the same thing about it, almost the same thing. He keeps a notebook of lines and just kind of assembles them, which is sort of, for those of us who have notebooks and never use them in poems, it's like, what are you doing? But it is remarkable. You think about the world. In the world, things collide into each other constantly, so it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
With respect to the rhythm, I think one thing that really helps is to read a lot of poetry and to hear the rhythms that all different kinds of poets make, from iambic pentameter to the looser free verse forms. But it helps to read your own work aloud as you're composing it. Now, I used to do everything by hand, and I don't anymore. I compose a lot on the computer, but it almost always starts with handwritten notes. And by the way, I don't always look back at my notebook. Sometimes I'll go back and open a notebook and find out that I had a line that would have been wonderful for a particular poem, but I don't have any kind of system of like indexing my notebooks, so it would take me too long unless I can remember about the time when it happened. My notebooks are chronological, but Annie Dillard, I think it was talked about one time. She keeps like a card file that indexes her notebooks so that she can find.
Wow.
And you can see how that's paid out. Yes, work is full of really wonderfully observed things. I am just not methodical enough to index my notebook. I started when she talked about that one time, I heard her talk about that. I went home full of resolution. I got some 3x5 cards and I was going to index my notebooks. And I lasted about 10 pages. I thought, I'll be spending my whole life indexing my notebook. I'm just not organized enough person.
I alphabetize my books, but that's it.
You'll never be bored.
No.
Your notebook.
No.
All right, well, I'd love to open up to the audience has
Yeah,
any questions.
I'm curious, Heather is pretty well known in Alfred for writing in town where it's the loudest. Not always, but a good bit of the time. Do you have a place where you write physically that's most creative or most productive?
It's best for me to write in a really quiet space. So I'm really fortunate. I have a room of my own. I have a little tiny room in our house where I write. I do sometimes, I've tried the, like going out to a cafe or a coffee shop or something. And that's good for like germinating ideas, but I can't actually write. I'm sort of ADHD, and to be in a public place means, I'll be writing and then that picture will catch my eye and then, someone will walk in and I can't. So it is, public places are good for kind of gathering material and messing about with things, but to really bring something to finish, I really need to present myself and not be interrupted, because any interruption, it would just be gone. And sometimes it's days before it comes back. So,
Maybe we
so
can
what I
install
would
maybe we can install a poets isolation group.
Yeah.
A telephone group with a desk.
Yeah. Except then if you have any claustrophobia.
Right.
That will work. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Last hit.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Question? Comment? All right. Well, thank you both.
Oh, this was so much fun.
And take just a 2-minute break, and then I'll invite my signatories to come on up. And all right.
And I don't think, I didn't see what, what way you imagine and just a little.
Just
Oh,
this is.
This is great. I hope they got the first grant. Sure. Did you? Okay, you should, let me know. And then there's another grant coming, which is going to be delayed. It's a state thing, so,
I've
right.
been mainly doing this with a.
I know. But it's always nice, if someone says, money for poetry, it's like.
Well, yeah.
I was forwarded an email the other day where we're aggressively seeking grant reviewers. They don't have enough people to physically review the grants.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
sure,
what's
yeah.
going on. They would ask me, would you be willing to do this? Not right now, it's just not gonna fit. And that's part of the issue.
Yeah, oh,
Back
yeah.
on the grants,
It's
just assigning
Yeah,
people
that's
to
true for
review
all
them.
kinds of organizations like that. Any organization that gives out money, it's hard to get to walk through all the applications and, making sure they're doing that.
Yeah, it's good work. It's good.
If I can do a story as opposed to poetry, I'm glad to have my name on your
There
list.
you go, of course you can. 5 minutes or? If anyone else would like to sign up to read, you can read or perform anything, as long as it's roughly 5 minutes. Okay, no takers?
You mean out here this evening?
Now here this evening, or you can come back if you like. and just bring it on.
Oh,
And then, kind of out through, trying to get along with the half. Town that we like.
2020. It was a bad year. But here we are, not like.
No, I meant poetry. I meant poetry. Why would you?
Yeah.
I would not have, I wouldn't have answered if I
There's another call about Woolsey, whose neighbor is. Things like that, so there are traumatic things that happen.
Yeah.
I did not know.
I was amazed by
Yeah,
how
what's on your mind?
it can create that. Yeah, so those last. Actually, they're like the most healing things I've ever written. You know, but this is how everything. Understanding.
Yeah, one group.
Right, that's good. But I can come down. I can come down.
You guys are definitely.
Monday's a good
Which one part is like small job? You put one word on.
Monday.
So you're gonna have like 10 words and some of them are, you know, five and say, okay, this is my strength today. Use these 5 words that I heard. Talk about.
Disappointed.
Yes.
Right.
But I'm glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, yes, yes. Lighter, yeah.
Interesting writer.
Anyway.
All right, I'm gonna call people back.
All right.
Okay. If I could make some mic adjustments. Is that okay?
Yes.
Quinn, does that sound good? All right, the one crucial joint here doesn't stay in place. But one thing you wish would stay in place doesn't stay in place. But that's okay. We will make it work.
They're all crucial, but not fail.
That's true, right, exactly. Right, as the train conductor and Alice Dean will tell you. So we're gonna begin the open mic in a minute or two, let people get their snacks and beverages. I'm gonna say a little bit about Scott Williams, who's gonna lead off the open mic. Scott is a Buffalo poet.
Yeah.
And I think Scott also spends a lot of time in Canandaigua. Am I right about this?
The girlfriend here.
Okay. So Scott is a retired mathematician, yeah. Okay, and also writes some really interesting poetry, and he's gonna come here in July and do his thing, and I will ask him a million questions and drive him crazy. Everyone can come and listen, and it'll be like 85 degrees, we'll have the door open, and it might be noisier, and that's okay. We'll come. I like the winter readings better, I really kind of do, I just feel like we're escaping from the world. But it's okay. Everybody else seems to like the summer readings better, so I'm in the minority. Scott Williams is gonna do a couple of poems for us.
Yeah.
And I'll ask everybody, like 5 minutes, 2 poems if you're doing poetry. Okay, Scott.
Yeah. Let's see, just try to secure here.
Very delicately around there, right? Move it away.
Not telling you.
Well, we'll try it anyway. I got a loud professor voice, so. And I have finished a book recently, but it's an homage to Richard Wright, and it will. I won't read anything from that tonight, but if you have some time tomorrow, I'm reading from about 2 to 2:30 at Rochester Central Library. So and it's a lot of it's focused in that direction. Not all from the Richard Wright book, 90 pages. Not all of it's going to be there, but just some of that stuff. Okay, so this is supposed to be, here it is right here. This is my most recently published poem. And I think the magazine is called Vigorous, out of Baltimore. He read at us, not to us. We applauded until we understood his first poems were stanzas. It was far past the time limit when we understood the new stanzas were actually poems. At us, he read rose sticker haiku, ignoring the host's salary, any babysitter's rising cost, and the afterward bar's closing time. Never mind your next day early rising. Regardless of our tightened kidneys, he went on and on and on. Speaking over a cowbell, his words became family-sized Wheaties strewing from a drunk kaleidoscope. Tall, swinging his hands to and fro, while tiptoed on hobnailed sandals. His reading glued me to my seat. I buried my head in my hand and heard myself saying, calm yourself, slow down, call 911, or perhaps 988. And he continued reading those poems, like a Jeffrey Dahmer spewing larynx. And then his Irish Spring words became dense as his meaning. And an evil leering green grimace began a devilish glow behind the smile. Had Thulu arrived? I begged the Orishas to perforate his tongue. He just read on and on. I heard that. You have a book titled Popes or something like that?
What's this?
Do you have a book titled Popes or about
Pope
Popes?
stories, yeah. I do have
Pope
a book
stories.
titled Pope
So I said, well, I'll come to this event and I'll read my Pope story. It's called 8 Leos. When my first daughter was born, July 27th, my father planted a tree and said, study Pope Leo VIII. A planet-struck astrologer wrote, Rachel has 8 Leos in her chart. Like Leo the 8th, anti-pope for a year. I understood the pine tree, standing now at 45 years, not the 8 Leos, nor the Pope from a no-church father. Leo the 8th was anti-Pope, 963 to 964. And good Pope, 964 to 969 death. A Cancer with 8 Leos in his chart. I wondered, were there Woolsey trees that made Leo the 8th anti-Pope or just politics? Will my girl be black anti-daughter and then good daughter when the evergreen tree dies? John the 12th made the papal treasury his wallet. Though he opened a brothel he and his cardinals frequented, and he was killed by a husband he cuckolded, John the 12th was Pope, never anti-Pope. Nor was there an anti-Pope like Boniface VIII, who practiced threesomes with 2 men, a cardinal and a wife, a mother and daughter. Did Leo VIII practice bestiality like Benedict IX? Made his street urchin lover a cardinal like Julius III? Hold open-air orgies like Alexander VI? Was his body riddled with syphilis scars like Julius II? Did an anti-pope die in bed with a page boy like Paul II? His nephew lover like Sixtus IV? His son's wife like Leo X? His mistress's daughter like Sergius III? If Leo VIII is a sole anti-pope and then a good pope, what was the transformation? Why did my father mention him? What does 8 Leo mean anyway? Those damn roaring 8 Leos now run my family.
I'm just going to say a couple of things. So, about going on at the mic, you can succeed and still do that. I won't tell you which poet who's in Poetry Magazine this month who I hosted once at the Cornelia Street Cafe in New York, and boy, did she go on for like 45 minutes. And the other poet sitting there waiting to read was Cornelius Eady.
Oh, I know him, yeah.
Yeah, he was very polite, awfully polite about it. He's a good man. So there's that. And then the popes, you had your own like pope catalog of sin. In my pope, one of my pope stories, a person has a vision and believes he is destined to be pope, and so he has to pick his name, and he rules out all the names by going through the catalog of sins of all the popes. And my sins are different than your sins. So I'm wondering where you got your information from. What to talk?
Oh, Mr. Google was a gem.
Yeah. Okay, a tough act to follow, but Peter Motzenbecker is going to follow. Peter Motzenbecker, first time here. Welcome. I do not have a voice that projects like a professor's voice. Can you hear me well enough?
Yes.
Okay. So I recently came up with the idea of a jigsaw poem, which happens when you find fragments that fit perfectly together. Now I know what I meant was a crazy quote poem. It sounded like the same thing. And I'm going to continue with the Catholicism theme, I guess. When I was a young adult, I chose to be confirmed as a Catholic. And partway through the process, I became a philosophy student. Started reading about arguments for and against the existence of God. Then I was confirmed, and a few months later, I was an agnostic. And I call this poem an agnostic poem. That's actually a lot of doubts that never become full-fledged agnosticism, questions and prayers unanswered. I have beheld the starlit sky and wondered if someone is looking back, if God is peeking through the sparkling lights, peering through peepholes that pass for stars, squinting and trying hard to see if everything is unfolding as expected. But of course, the universe is unfolding as expected. Eyesight is for finite minds that search the sky for centuries and still discover unnamed stars. A God who has forever known every star and everything illuminated by the stars has no need to look and see. For he has always known every moment and every aspect, ever since he crumpled up everything into an infinitesimal wad and lit a fuse. And when it blew, he knew the first moment in all of its compact completeness. Knowing the nature of all things, he knew all subsequent moments, each the slightest expansion of one homogeneous mass radiating from a common point of origin. An explosion generating galaxies, solar systems, planets, and species, including humankind. Blessed with limitless imagination, but cursed with limited cognition, we are compelled to contemplate a God all-knowing and yet unknowable. This is the ultimate epistemic asymmetry. He knows everything about me, but I do not even know if he exists. He knows all of my various selves, myself that I have only shared with those who know me well, myself that I have only shared with those I do not know at all, myself that I have shared only with myself. He even knows myself that I myself do not even know. Infinite mirror of eternity, if you completely know our history, our privacy and solitude merely illusory, are we, though seeming free, a cog inside a Laplacian machine, a gear in movement in a perfect timepiece? If you foresee my future so well as you see my past, you know my sins were predetermined even before I was born. Lies and harms that follow from myopic human vision seem less reprehensible than viruses that replicate and grow faster than science. Is this not indiscriminate, disproportionate punishment? Reasonably good people who perish with murderers and rapists. All this for the sake of well-tested faith. Is this behavior worthy of a perfectly good, can-do-anything know-it-all? If only there were a jury of your peers. When a mother prays in soul-consuming agony for her child entombed without ceremony beneath sturdy buildings that stood for centuries, does your divine, infinite mind have any sense of her anguish? If her child is lifted from her grave, coughing up particulate dust, she may believe there really is a God. If her child is pulled out of debris, covered in white cosmetic powder that conceals her pallid skin, perhaps she will think, well, it's God's will. Is the difference arbitrary intervention, or are you peeking through the sparkling lights and thinking, cancer, I should have thought of that.
Peter, you are definitely a left Catholic, man. Wow, that's very heavy. Linda Pratt. Is Linda here?
I am.
Oh, there she is. Like, Pratt. I was like, okay, that's what I was looking for. Linda Pratt, everybody. Hurrah.
Hello. Can you all hear me?
No.
Can you? Works. How's that? Is that good?
Good.
Hello?
Really loud.
Really loud, okay, really loud. Loud phones.
Yeah. Let me be your sound person, your ineffective sound person. Okay.
try that.
Big tones.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
Can you hear me now? Better? Okay. I have pandemic films. I'm warning you. Okay. Let's see. Excuse me. Okay. So the first one is based on a show that was on Netflix. It was called Inside with Bo Burnham. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's brilliant. And it's about his journey as somebody who has social anxiety disorder, being a stand-up comic, and that he wanted to take time off from comedy, and then the pandemic hit. And then he wrote about, his time surviving the pandemic. Truly is brilliant. But it stirred something in me, and so here's a poem called Threshold. Write something, anything, down, below the surface, mind from my mind, view, behind masks, behind time. Where am I without you? Unsettled, void, left by, silence, inside, go get left of what's left, before the moment, doors closed, the calendar about to turn, full stop, where to go, nowhere, except the Zoomiverse, hands to screen, cold surface, no, flesh and blood. Walking streets, socially distant, the house becomes church, school, coffee house, dance party of one. Rubbing my eyes of unwanted hibernation, light unblinking, I see you and the space between us. Still, re-engagement from separation, returning from germ warfare. We're PTSD from isolated, invisible trauma. No, this has been a locked closet. Where have you been? And this one is based upon a visit to George Floyd Square in Minneapolis, summer of 21. Untangle the floral rectangle, lift every candle. Can you handle 8 minutes pressed on a neck, slowly asphyxiating? The lens tells no lies, our eyes unblinking, unwilling, unbelieving. This happened before, again. Thoughts and prayers left behind. This time though, one name joins another, chalked into a list, drifting down the street, a flight of angels' feet. Bow your heads, honor the dead. Only when you look within, wash your skin. Okay. Can I end with something happy? Can I end with happier? Okay. All right. Real quick. Okay. Same trip. This is called Travel Haiku. Traveling by car to Wisconsin and Minnesota. Traffic stop. 6 lanes wide, both directions, going nowhere, fast. Radio waves. Country grain, baseball, Jesus. Static boundaries. Hangry time. Edible options revealed. Packed parking lot. Car beeping, crossing double yellow line, time to change drivers. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Linda is bringing the energy. All right. And now someone who has read here a bunch of times and is returning to the mic, Jasmine Willis.
Yay!
Much shorter than everybody else. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
That mic's not gonna behave, John.
No. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I wrote a book called The Waiting Room, and some people have been reading it and enjoying it, and people have been telling me good things about it. So that sparked a sequel because people are demanding it from me. So I'm working on that right now, but I'm gonna read from you a little bit of, the first book. You'll have to wait on the second book, it's not done yet. But it talks about, metaphorically and allegorically, it talks about mental health, which is very important to talk about right now, especially right now. Because it's something that, even after all these years, it's still a taboo thing that nobody wants to talk about, but it's something that's very real. And I feel like it in itself is a epidemic, it's a pandemic itself, because every time you turn on the news, somebody's committing suicide, whether it's a celebrity or somebody in your hometown, somebody local. It's just horrible. And I feel like if somebody could pick up a book like this, that's gonna talk about it. It's gonna talk about suicide, it's gonna talk about depression, it's gonna talk about anxiety. And it's not gonna talk about it in a judgmental way, it's gonna talk about it in a way that is understanding of it, because the author of it has been through it. So I'm not going to, judge that person, because I've been through it myself. And it was a book that I wish I would have had growing up. So it's sort of like my love letter to the broken. So I'm going to read a little bit of it for you right now. A vision of a spiritual emergency room keeps visiting me over and over. In it, there are doctors and nurses working around the clock to repair souls. There are the administrators at the desk signing people in and asking them to take a seat in the waiting room. Yes, even the spiritual emergency room has a waiting room. The vision comes to me mostly at night, when everything is shut down from the day, and I'm left with the worry of tomorrow. I'm left wondering what kind of future I will have, and if it will be what I always dreamed of. My despair and depression are on high alert until the light starts to peek through the windows, and eventually my mind shuts down and I sleep. Once asleep, I'm plagued with the stress and anxiety of what ifs. What if I don't get that job? What if I can't find my place? What if I don't get married and have a family? What if I don't become a success story? What if no one cares about anything I've ever done? And what if I wasted my life? Often I turn to music in these moments, and it's what helps me get through. It is really a great thing that music was invented, isn't it? How many of us have been there? How many of us have a soundtrack to our lives? Oh yeah. Mine's mainly Foo Fighters, don't judge me. But yeah, mostly nowadays though, it's just all that music that you wish that you could turn up and go all through the back roads of America and listen to, like all that indie music. So here we are in the emergency room. We have a huge need to see the doctor because our soul is in need of surgery. We have been diagnosed with some horrible disease, like lack of faith or lack of trust, or teetering on the edge of suicidal thoughts. This is where we come to be in repair. When we have depression, you come in all the time. The administrators know who I am. I am in the system as one of the usual cases who refuse to believe I could be saved. I am in code red on the charts that say I'm at higher risk and I need to be evaluated as soon as the doctor can see me. Sometimes I get tired of the endless exams, forms, and questions of my state of mind. But I know they're just doing their job. This is a spiritual quest, and it has to be perfect. It has to follow all the rules and guidelines. I look around and notice a line behind me. This isn't anything new, because every time I've been here, there's a long line. I know it's going to be another long night in the spiritual emergency room.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
All right. That is sort of a story, and now we have someone who is literally a storyteller, professional storyteller, Mr. Quinn Golden, Quinn, I'll just put in a plug for your group. You guys meet here
third Tuesday of every month.
They meet here third Tuesday of every month, and basically, well, some of the people are seasoned storytellers and some are not, and if you're interested in oral storytelling, come on down.
Thank you.
All right, Quinn Golden.
So we tell stories, we talk about stories, and we help budding storytellers, hopefully, turn into storytellers. And that's what I do. So tonight, 5 minutes, right? So Gilgamesh is probably off the table. I kind of wanted to do Orpheus and Eurydice, but that's still a little bit over that. So I dug a little deeper, and I thought maybe I would do an Irish folktale. Because everybody likes Irish folktales. So what you need to know first is that Brandon Bohannon was a gambler. And if you don't know that, the whole rest of the story makes absolutely no sense at all. So Brandon Bohannon is a gambler, and he's inside of a pub in the town that he lives in, and he gambles, and he gambles, and he gambles. And he does it pretty well with his gambling, and he's got some other things that he does to earn himself. He has a farm, and he's not a very good farmer, but he does have a farm, and he's got some animals, he's a house and a barn and a paddock, and that's kind of what he does on the surface, but Mr. Bohannon's a gambler. So he's in the local pub and he's gambling. He's been gambling away the night, and it's 11:30, and the pub keeper says it's time to go home. Last call's over, it's time for you all to leave. And Brandon Bohannon says, no, I'm not going to go. I've got to gamble. I'm still gambling. George, come on over here and sit down and gamble with me. George said, no, I can't. I'm not going to gamble for you. Tomorrow's Lent. It won't be good to gamble on the Lent. And it's time for us to move on from this. And it's time to go home. But one by one, all the patrons of the pub all take off and go home. And they finally leave Bohannon the gambler all alone. And the innkeeper is shutting down the inn, and he walks over, he opens the door, and he shows Mr. Bohannon to the door. And he begins to walk home. Well, for all of his bravado and all of his loudness inside of the pub, when he's home, when he's going home alone in the dark, walking down the long gravel road back to his place, he's not quite so brave as he seems to be. He's a little on the superstitious side. He's a little bit nervous, and he's walking along because he's accustomed to walking home in the morning while the sun's coming up after a full night of gambling. And he's walking along, and he sees a shadow move on the trail ahead of him. And he's looking at it as he's walking, and he realizes as he's getting closer, it's a rabbit, a hare, a rabbit. And he walks along and he watches, and as he's getting closer to it, he realizes that the rabbit is not running away as rabbits usually do, but it turns and faces towards him and sits down. And as he's getting closer and closer to it, the rabbit stands up on his haunches, on his back. As George is walking closer, it appears as though the rabbit is growing as he's getting closer to it. It's not just the illusion of getting closer, but the rabbit actually appears to be getting bigger. And when he gets to the rabbit, it's actually face to face with him there on the road, and it meets him. And the rabbit says, "You'd be Bo Bohannon the gambler, would you?" Bo was rather shocked with this. And he said, "Well, yes, that would be me. I am Bo Bohannon the gambler." And the rabbit said, "And you said at one time that you would gamble with anybody, anywhere, anytime. You always have your cards with you, did you not?" He said, "Well, yeah, I did say that." The rabbit said, "Well, take out the cards, because I'm here to gamble with you." Bo takes out the cards. And right there in the ditch on the side of the road, they sit down. And Bo feeds out the cards and takes out the cards, and they play a few rounds, and the rabbit wins one, Bo wins one, the rabbit wins two, Bo wins two, and they're going back and forth. But as the evening with the night wears on, Bo is losing, and he loses his money to the rabbit, and he loses his coat, and he loses his hat. And he's sitting on the side of the road, and he's getting rather desperate. It's starting to get light off in the distance, and he has gambled away all of his winnings and his coat and his hat, which the rabbit is now wearing. Oh, thanks to himself. There's not much chance of the rabbit bringing the constable to my place to collect on anything. So he says to the rabbit, he says, I'll tell you what, he says, best 2 out of 3. He says, I'm all in, I'll give you all I've got, but I want you to put in all you've taken from me tonight so I can get it all back. And the rabbit says, well, it seems as though I've got everything of yours anyway, so what do you have to put up? And Bo says, I'll put up my farm, my house, my barns, and my animals. Best 2 out of 3. The rabbit leans forward. He locks eyes with Bo, his whiskers twitch. His ears lay back over his shoulders, and he nods. And Bo hands out the cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the rabbit picks up his hand and he looks at it. He draws 2 cards. Bo draws 3. The rabbit lays down 2 of a kind. Bo lays down a full house. He's 1 up out of the 3. He sits up and he thinks for himself for a moment. He's got this, and he lays out 5 more cards. And he draws his own 5 cards. The rabbit picks up his cards and looks at them. The rabbit draws 2. Bo looks at his cards. He draws 3. They lay down their cards. Rabbit's got 2 pair, jack high. Bo lays down his cards. He's got 2 pair, 10 high. 1 to 1. Bo's getting a little nervous. This is the last one as he's all in for nothing, and he deals out the cards just 1 more time. And the rabbit picks up his cards and he draws 1. And Bo picks up his cards and he draws 1. And they both look at their cards. What I can tell you is the outcome of this hand is the reason why, to this day, if you go by what appears to be an abandoned farm overgrown with nobody living in it, it's overrun with rabbits. Thank you.
All right, so if you want more storytelling, second Tuesday of every month, third Tuesday of every month. I should know that. You know, this is sort of like half my cat day. So the last performer of the night is Melissa Simmons. Big round of applause for Melissa, her first time here.
I'll stand up too. This is good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So a new friend of mine said that everybody here is rooting for me, not against me.
That's right. Yes, yes.
So, I've been writing all my life, but this is the first time I'm sharing a writing besides a book. And I'm trying to figure out what I fit into. I don't really know. Maybe spoken word. Okay. This is called Be Seen, Be Seen. I dreamt I was on a stage. I dreamt I had a huge audience. I dreamt I was asked to do a TED Talk. I had never seen a TED Talk. I dreamt people knew my name. I dreamt you knew my name. I dreamt you wouldn't know me. I'm not worthy. I'm a scared child hiding and pretending to be an astronaut in my backyard tree. You wouldn't see me. I'm an acrobat or a clown from the circus I just saw, practicing over and over again in my backyard. You wouldn't recognize me. I'm Annie. I'm big red hair, twirling and singing. The sun will come out tomorrow, as long as I can after I saw her on stage. I am Annie for days. I am a clown for days. I am an acrobat for days. I am an astronaut for days in my backyard. I am all, everything, but not me. I go through the next years trying not to be me. I do sports, and in my mind, I am unstoppable. My performances are spectacular. I make three-point shots. I do layups, maneuvering around other teams to get the shot. I hit home run after home run. I slide into bases. Safe. I'm not that good. In the school play, I sing and dance as Morgana. Everyone claps and cheers. I sing at the talent show, my friends' tears. They clap, but mostly because I tried. I could ski mountains, in and out of mogos, parallel ski just like my mom, fast, approaching the group in front of me. They're actually good. At my community college, I am Farrah Fawcett in the burning bed, trapped in the fireplace. At least that's what I remember. I'm also a woman having an abortion, reacting. I'm asked to be in a band from a guy who was a crush on me because of my hazel eyes and red hair. But couldn't he tell that I dyed my hair? I'm Natalie Merchant. I'm the Sundays. We play parties in basements and asked to do a local concert. It ends because I go back to my ex and I get engaged and he doesn't approve. Now, I am determined to be a good religious wife now. I'm 21. I'm asked to be in a church skit for hundreds of people, hundreds of youths. I go off script, I do a somersault down the aisle, and I fall and I sit on a boy's lap, acting as a dumb clown, like a Southern girl with my Southern made-up twang accent. People laugh. The wife of the pastor who set this whole ordeal up says to me, I'm glad Hollywood didn't get you first. This is the first compliment I ever remember receiving that I'm proud of. She's not meaning it in a good way, but that's what I wanted to perform. I sing in the choir and in the pews, learning not to be loud, because you cannot be proud. Compliments now are from those seeking the devil's rewards. I get quieter. I'm determined to be a great mom. Years later, understanding that could never happen being part of an abusive religion and an abusive marriage. I can say I did the best I knew how. Thank God I am free now. I'm 42. I spent years in crisis mode, being judged and still controlled, not knowing if I was okay. Then once I had a breath, I secretly wrote again. I get to perform reading a script on stage with a small crowd. I don't remember, but they said I did good. I tried other things too, trying to be a better mom. Woe is me. I've made children in my image. I've damaged them. Thank God, or the universe, because now I don't know what I believe in, but thankfully they have voices, better choices, and just be. Years go by now, and I am in brain state trauma 24/7. Finally, through coaching and therapy, figuring that out, now I can experience some freedom. I dream. I'm an actor, singer, performer, clown, astronaut. I dream I'm a good mother. Thanking the universe. They are wonderful children, forgiving. All on their own paths now, learning how and who not to be because of me. I can slow down and appreciate them. I dreamt you'd see me. I dreamt I'm worthy. I dreamt I had time to become maybe my childhood dreams. A 52-year-old Annie. It's our life for us. I dream now of the possibilities of grandchildren I won't destroy but spoil, maybe make up for the past toils. I don't have to write in secret anymore. I can tell people that's something I enjoy. Karaoke is one thing my people know I love, voice cracking, nervous, and fun. I can dream of days ahead with my beautiful children, letting them see that all I ever wanted was to be seen, loved, and free. I dream you will know my name. I dream my family won't see me as a shame. I dream for the future and what it holds, me. I'm looking forward to life's goal. And as far as the TED Talk, for having a huge audience, I'm okay if that never comes my way. I'll settle for a clown, an astronaut, an acrobat, a mom, maybe a grandma, pot-smoking artist who likes karaoke, and Annie.
So, Melissa, we'll do what we can for you with the TED Talk, okay? We'll see.
Pack the room. I've hosted, I don't know, dozens of open mics and features over the years, 30 years. I sense a little magic in the room tonight. I don't always get that, but I got it tonight. So you'll indulge me because I have no pictures of myself and I want to be part of this. I want to say, hey, you're at the mic. Okay. I'm gonna read you one poem for my wife, whose cafe this is, and who put this together essentially. I don't know where she is. She's out there, Haley. We're going to get her. It's okay. It's better if she doesn't hear me, probably. This is a poem from my book called New York and Other Lovers, and I got the royalty statement from the publisher today, and so I felt really guilty. I was like, oh, I better go read a poem from that book. Let's just say it would barely buy lunch. So this is for her. The only preface here is that At Last by Etta James was our wedding song.
Oh.
So the people in here are not us, by the way. I just want to make that clear. Okay. At last, he calls to say, I'm in love. At last, he calls to say, I'm in love, but too late for New Jersey. For a girl who craves long distance drama, it's my midlife crisis. Violins. I don't know about her life on the verge of surrender to a young bed or old easy chair. Porgy and Bess like on a Brooklyn street, she stops me dead and takes my hand to ask, what are we doing? I don't know. I consult the runes of Etta James, in love with a married man when she sang, my lonely days are over and life is just a poem, shorter than it seems. Her melody, a spogliarello, a striptease bearing the bloody heart. I explain because she says, I love Italians like you, people who freely speak their heart. He says, I play the bass because the heart beats there. She doesn't hear it. I love her, but it ain't gonna happen. She's just too young. Cellos to the bridge. The 3-minute song dies a long, slow death. Separate loves of one life fused in sweet sonatas, mashups, fugues. She says, you said you were leaving your wife. I was. My bags were packed, my heart wrapped up in clover. Now some musician loves her too. We're all married in different ways. She says, I understand. What are we doing? I don't know. He uploads a song he knows she'll hear, then tries a poem he knows she'll never read. Just American music, as Etta, born James Etta, said. He was born in Jersey. He says, I'm 40. I have to leave it behind like heroin, like refrain. She kisses me like brushing a cymbal, touches my graying hair, hers dyed, says, what if they found out? Says, you know we can't say things like this, but let's always do. Like a song, pretends to cast a spell. As a cappella, Etta holds the final note like a promise. Then, dead stop. Violence. Importantly, and thank you for indulging. You won't have to listen to me next time, I promise. But next month will be John Burroughs, the Beat Poet Laureate of the U.S., straight from Cleveland. Heather. John runs something called Crisis Chronicles Press, too, which is a great little small press. And he's a really dynamic, interesting guy, Scott. You can back me up on this. Yeah. And
he has one of the few poems that I read when I go out that aren't mine.
that aren't yours.
Yeah.
That's a compliment,
Yeah.
the ultimate compliment. So he'll be here March 24th. I think it's a Friday night. And another open mic and more hijinks. Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure. Thank you for coming out. And thank you. Thank you again to